What people become Prime Minister of St. Lucia have been the most readied of all of them.
So again, you were ready now, then you were
Readied.
ready then,
Yes.
Dr. Anthony, even then.
Even then,
And,
readied.
And then
Alan Chasley,
then
and Von
then
Lewis,
Dr. Von
and
Lewis.
John Compton, and George Charlton of them have been the most readied.
Because of what? Your years in politics?
Because my experience, my ministerial experience, based on ministerial experience, I've been the most ready.
I, Philip Joseph here.
I would like to be judged as being the Prime Minister, not being judged as being part of a government.
Came into government that we had a manifesto and a vision and mission that had been approved by my party, by the highest body.
Basel 11 has not been in existence. 50 was...
Giant getting bazooka. You spraying big on to knock out mosquitoes.
I have never had a joint account with anybody in my life. Not my ex-wife, not my children, nobody. And I will refer that to the Privileges Committee.
What about the culture of people getting into office and not being effective in taking
What people become Prime Minister of St. Lucia have been the most ready.
Let's do it this Wednesday, because if it's Wednesday, it's NewsMaker Live.
Good evening, welcome to another edition of NewsMaker Live right here on DBS Television. My name is Timothy Poleon. We'll be together until 10 o'clock this evening, at which time we conclude with the clip that peaked. I have a special guest in studio, and we'll be focusing on some political events which have preoccupied your attention over the last few days right here in St. Lucia. And of course, during the course of the broadcast, we'll be taking your calls at the appropriate time, so please stay with us. My guest this evening, opposition senator and a member of the Opposition United Workers Party, Mr. Titus Preville. He contested the last general election unsuccessfully on a UWP ticket for the Babonneau seat. Welcome to the broadcast, sir.
Thank you very much, Tim. And just let me say from the outset, I have served in the Senate on 2 occasions. The Senate rules allow for a temporary senator to be appointed on occasions where the regular or sitting senator is not available. So I recognize you refer to me as senator.
Temporary senator.
Absolutely.
Occasional senator.
Yes.
Every now and then.
As the circumstance determines, I am more than happy to serve the people of St. Lucia.
Tell me about this particular method that is being employed by the United Workers Party every now and then to change from the substantive senator to a temporary senator.
Well, it's not necessarily a method that's been employed. It is really circumstances drive that more than anything. For instance, in the last sitting, the leader of the opposition in the Senate, Senator Tommy Descott, he was out of Ireland, unavailable, and therefore I came in to sit for him. On other occasion, the other occasion that I have sat, I think it was one of the other senators was unwell. So in the wisdom that is on the wisdom of governance we have recognizes that and not on every occasion that we would have the senators all senators in place, and we see from time to time. For instance, I noticed on the government side, there was a temporary senator at one time.
Mr. George Gordon.
Mr. George Gordon, for instance.
And Shelton Daniel.
Correct. So it is a mechanism that is there to ensure the people of St. Lucia get representation in the Senate at full complement once one person is unable to attend.
During the course of the program, speaking on some of those hot button issues that will include recent events centering around the SSDF, the Citizenship and Investment Program, among others. But first, you unsuccessfully contested the last general election on a United Workers Party ticket for Babonneau, and you lost by 1,171. This would have come as a surprise to many political observers. To what do you attribute that kind of defeat that you suffered?
Very, very straightforward. I think the main cause of that had to do with the injection of funds by the government, the injection of funds in a manner to influence the outcome, that I will personally never do. I will not be a part of that. It was all about buying votes, and this is where the SSDF comes in. The number of government vouchers that were issued to persons directly by my opponent, who was not a minister of government or a civil servant, and that is the people in the community tell you. I had a call only a couple of days ago where someone mistakenly called me asking if I could give them a voucher, thinking that I was the minister who had given them. So, you know, this is not laughable, but it is a very serious matter. But this is where our country's politics has reached. There is what we refer to, in large measure, as transactional politics. The electorate themselves, in a number of instances, walk up to you and say to you, "What you giving me to vote for you?" I was on the line, Timothy, going to vote when an individual walked up to me and said, "I'm ready to vote." I said, "Well, what's your name?" Because I thought he wanted to know if he was in the right location. He told me, "I come to vote." I tell you, "Well, if your name is so and so, you should be." He says, "No, how much you paying me?" And there was a policeman standing right there. I said, "Are you serious? Do you want to get me thrown into jail?" I said, "My brother, this is not what our electioneering process is about. People don't pay you to vote." I said to him, "Please leave here right away." You see, because, Timothy, where we have reached in our country, unfortunately, is that people have now taken leave of what an election is about, and they have reduced it to what can I get, a short-term transaction.
Who's to be blamed for that?
A number of elements need to be blamed.
Because I want to tell you, they blame the politicians because the politicians promise that certain policies would be implemented, certain laws would be enacted for the benefit of the wider St. Lucian society or constituents of a particular constituency, and that never comes to pass. So therefore, they're looking for this instant gratification, instant payment, and do what they're saying basically is, after that, do the hell what you want.
And if a politician or a political party engages in that, does it show leadership? It doesn't show leadership. It shows followership. It shows willing to engage by any means necessary to get into power, not to serve. And when someone votes in an election, in what we have, representational politics, what a person does is that the person is looking around to see who among those persons in my community or my country I believe will best represent me. Because ideally, if we could all represent ourselves in Parliament, I wouldn't want anybody to speak for me. I will go speak for myself. But it's obvious all of us cannot go. So we look among ourselves and we decide, well, I think this person or this person has exemplified the skills I want. They have come up with programs and policies which largely address the issues I have, we have, and I would like that person to be my voice in the Parliament. So when a person is voting, the person is not voting for someone, the person is voting for themselves. The person is saying, I want you to be my voice in the Parliament. So why should the politician be paying to be the person's voice in the Parliament? It is the person who wants you to be the voice in the Parliament. So if you understand that, there is no room in our politics for people to pay somebody else to vote for them. And that is I believe strongly, once that becomes the means used to get into office, you have obviously started on the wrong footing. You will be plagued by your action. You will reap the consequences of that action because it is founded on forgery. It is not founded on anything genuine. And it is something that, whether we believe it or not, you cannot do wrong and expect right. So, me, I will not be part of the process of buying votes in any way, shape, or form. I respect people too much for that. Even if a person does not respect himself, I will respect that person too.
The kind of transactional politics that you made reference to, which is also being described as treating, and that is very much against the law. Why do you think that this appears to be under the radar, where, for example, it goes undetected by the so-called observers, the election observers, the likes of representatives from the OAS and your CARICOM and the Carter Center? Because it seems a fait accompli. Automatically, those people, when they issue their reports, they tell you it was free and fair.
It's what you are looking for. What are you looking for as an OAS, as an election observer? The election observer is looking to see if people have easy access to vote on election day. Are there any impediments allowing you to exercise your vote? And these have more to do with operational issues. Were the polling divisions opened on time? So it's those things the election observers are looking for.
But what about fairness, when they say it was fair?
Fair in the sense that you had an equal chance to take part. Fair in the sense that there was no one or no system or no process denying you access. That is what they're looking at. But what we're talking about is reflected in campaigning, with where you are literally going to pay people not to vote on election day or to vote on election day for you, where you are literally bribing people to vote for you, paying, where you make promises such as, if you vote, you are a sitting government minister, and you say to the person, if you vote for me, I will ensure your son gets a scholarship. And the person is saying to themselves, wow, I really need my son to get a scholarship, so I will vote for that person. But Timothy, just that action, just that already sends a compromise. Because the grant of scholarships should be open to everyone, not so? How could a minister predetermine who gets a scholarship? How could you do it? People ought to come through a process, and the best persons get a scholarship. From the moment someone says to you, if you vote for me, I will give you a scholarship, the person is saying that even if your son or your daughter does not deserve it, is not the best person, I will make sure you get it at the expense of the one who really should get it. This is what we are setting up. And this is unfortunately, and these are some of the things that go into an election in our country right now.
But how do you ensure that the process is fair? We should be policing, for example, the Election Act to ensure that such breaches do not go undetected. Are you talking about law enforcement in the police or officials at the electoral department?
Well, we are looking at a whole system. On election day, we should have the police conduct itself in the polling divisions and stations according to the rules, that there ought to be, within the 100 yards, only the persons appointed by the two parties to serve inside the particular polling station, the agents that is, and the persons at the 100 yards. There ought to be no political operatives within the space. In the last general elections, I saw that was happening throughout. Persons who were not voting were talking and guiding people, and they were not staff of the electoral office. They were persons from the political party, the Labour Party, because I hate people. I say there are rules. We don't engage in that. And the police did not move them. These things happened. I can only tell you what reports I had of persons parked vehicles in different locations before you get to the polling station, saying here is X amount of money to vote for so and so. This is really what went on. This went on. Now, how do you control that? A lot of this has to do with the integrity of the political parties and the political operatives. If you have no integrity, that's good game. That's fair game.
But allegations are also made against the opposition.
In what way?
Where, for example, two candidates were questioned by the police. And isn't it an indication that both sides are doing it?
No, it's not. And I can speak for myself and say categorically no. And I can speak and say, look at the situations that we're talking about. In the case of Tommy Descart, a most interesting case. Up to now, the police has taken no action. He has not been detained. He has not been charged. He has not been arrested. And let us see when these things happen. First of all, Tommy Descat was not even in the vehicle when the police took the action. It was after 6 o'clock in the evening. After 6, polling stations are closed. And now the police decides that they're going to stop a vehicle to see if you have money. And is there any law against having money? The issue is, have you found someone paying someone to vote? And there was none of that. So in the case of Guy Joseph, similarly. So when I say to you, a lot of this has to do with the integrity of the individual persons and the political parties. This is critical. But here is where the state has an intervention. And this takes us to the SSDF. And you would have heard the leader of the opposition ask questions with respect to the transfers of money that went to the SSDF in the year the financial year 2025-26, which, as was reported by the Prime Minister in his budget address, the amounts look very, very interesting. And we're in a situation now where we're seeing circulated on social media checks purporting to be issued from the SSDF to recipients, and the recipients don't seem, for some reason, to be fitting the criteria for the SSDF checks that were received. That the process of delivery of those SSDF checks, as has been reported on social media, seem very inconsistent with what an SSDF as an institution should be doing. And therefore, when you see that, you ask yourself, how is it that so many food vouchers were issued in the run-up to the elections, purportedly from the SSDF? What those checks issued by SSDF staff? What were the criteria those checks were issued by? Works that were done purportedly with resources from the SSDF. What was the procurement process for these works? So we are in a situation where you could have, we are having a sense that a state institution, the SSDF, is established. It's a main reason for establishing it. And I took some time to think through and to research on the SSDF. It was established, it's a statutory corporation established since 1998. And its main purpose, its mandate, is to deliver basic services and infrastructure to the poor and vulnerable. So you have an institution set up to deliver to the poor and vulnerable. And by definition, you have the state and you have the poor and vulnerable. You have serious inequity in power in this situation. The state is a powerful institution. The poor and vulnerable is exactly that, poor and vulnerable. So that state institution has a duty to ensure the delivery of its service is done in a manner which does not further humiliate or does not humiliate this poor and vulnerable people, that the people receive that service with dignity, and very importantly, these persons are protected from abuse. So the SSDF, in its delivery of services, I expect, because the SSDF Act makes provisions for rules, I would expect that the persons who will be delivering food vouchers or checks or work would have certain criteria, that those checks would be issued by staff of the SSDF. Records would be kept, because those recipients ought to meet the criteria for those checks or vouchers or any works that they would do, and that there's a proper recording of that to protect those persons from abuse. So if there is any circumstance where a politician is somehow themselves handing over vouchers or checks to the poor and vulnerable, you are placing that person in a situation where they become subservient to an individual who holds power. And once you have this unequal level of power, the vulnerable becomes even more vulnerable. That vulnerable person now feels that they owe whatever they're getting to an individual, not an institution again, an individual, and they better find themselves behaving in the manner instructed by that individual, not the institution now, the individual. If not, they will not get that much needed support. So we cannot have a state institution such as the SSDF in any way hijacked by politicians hijacking a state institution for political gain. This destroys the quality of life of the recipient. It makes that person into almost a master slave environment, because you have the vulnerable with no power at the behest of an individual who has immense power. So the SSDF processes, I am 100% sure, could never have been set up for that to happen, because the SSDF Act makes provisions for the development of rules. The SSDF Act makes provisions for and not just provisions, mandates that the SSDF keeps regular accounts, and it produces annual audits and annual reports, and those audits and reports must be laid in the Parliament of St. Lucia. And the reasons for that are, as I was explaining to you, to ensure transparency, accountability, so that everyone knows this institution that serves the most vulnerable is doing that with integrity, and that the vulnerable and the poor feel empowered at the end of the exercise, not further marginalized. So if we look at, for instance, what we know of the SSDF at this point, we recognize that the last annual audit laid in the Parliament was the 2022-2023 audit. And when that was laid, the auditor made certain observations in the conduct of the audit. And just to give you a flavor, and the requirement to submit audited statements is in section 17 of the act establishing the SSDF. And it says here that section states that, section 17, it states that the SSDF must keep proper accounts and records, that the accounts must be audited annually by the Director of Audit or another auditor appointed under the Finance Administration Act. It goes further. The audited accounts and the auditor's report must be submitted to the minister responsible and laid in Parliament. And this must be done within 6 months of the close of the financial year. So our financial year runs from 1st of April to 31st of March. So 6 months from the 1st of April, we should be seeing the report of the audit, the auditor's report, and the statement laid in Parliament. So Timothy, when we look at the last audit report, 2022-2023, under the area of financial management, the audit cited weaknesses in documentation for some project expenditures, making verification of those expenditures very difficult. It cited, with respect to procurement practices, instances of procurement not fully aligned with government guidelines. There is need for stricter adherence to competitive bidding and transparent supplier selection. Under project oversight, it says monitoring of community projects was inconsistent. It went further. Some projects lacked timely completion reports, which affected accountability. And very important, under governance and compliance, the audit of 2022-23 says board oversight was functional, but required stronger enforcement of internal controls. Compliance with statutory reporting timelines was uneven, meaning the board was not ensuring that the annual reports were being delivered as required. Well, since 2022-23, that report laid in Parliament, I have tried to find out, have there been any other reports laid in the Parliament from the SSDF? And I cannot seem to identify any. So it would tell us that 2023-2024, that audit report has not been laid in Parliament. 2024-2025 has not been laid in Parliament. And therefore, you and I are not in a position today to know if the recommendations of 2022-2023 were implemented. Because what these reports done, we would have been able to trace and track what these things were done.
So therefore, Mr. Preville, why do you believe that the authorities have not seen the necessity, therefore, amidst all the concern that's being expressed and all the questions that are being asked, for them to come forward and to address those issues? And the parading of checks via social media certainly is something that would, I imagine, under normal circumstances, would cause the board of directors, would cause the management of the SSDF, the minister with responsibility for finance, to ask certain questions of those people who are managing those funds. So therefore, why do you think that nobody has come to the fore, publicly at least, to address that particular issue?
The buck stops with the minister responsible for the SSDF, who happens to be the Prime Minister of St. Lucia and the Minister for Finance. And if you hear nothing coming out of the Minister for Finance and the Prime Minister on what is circulating in social media, placing the SSDF's reputation in grave disrepute, something tells me that either the Prime Minister or Minister for Finance does not find that to be a matter that is worth his time. Maybe it's not a serious enough matter for him. Maybe he's still collecting information. We would at least expect the SSDF board, the chairman of the board, to have made a statement. If not the chairman, the minister is responsible for. Because here's what's at stake, Tim. The SSDF, as we have indicated, is a critical pillar in helping the poor and the vulnerable. The resources that go into the SSDF these resources come from you and me, our taxpayers, the government of St. Lucia, the taxpayers who put money in there, the taxpayers from other friendly countries such as the European Union as a bloc, the United Kingdom, Canada, other friendly governments who care about the poor and the vulnerable in St. Lucia. So they take their taxpayers' money and they allocate it to the SSDF in St. Lucia. They make it available to the SSDF in St. Lucia to help our vulnerable. The Caribbean Development Bank, it puts resources into the SSDF. So if perchance the need to account to the people of St. Lucia on the use of the SSDF funds was perhaps not something that the government or the SSDF found important enough to do, they should at least consider that there are the taxpayers of other countries whose resources are in the SSDF, for which audited accounts are missing, or should I say audited reports have not been laid in the Parliament, and whose resources are purportedly being used in a manner which is not consistent with what the SSDF is supposed to be using the resources for. So you would have expected, at least for those institutions and those countries, there would have been a statement from the government of St. Lucia. This has not happened.
Could this be taking place behind closed doors?
This is not a behind closed doors matter, Tim. The issue of those checks are in the public domain. The business of government is public. A private sector has its private business. public funds, the government of St. Lucia, the thing that is that can be considered most important for secrecy or should not be readily open to the public are matters of national security. Outside of that, it's a public service. It's not a service of a political party. It is not the business of a few people. It's not your private money. It is the people's money. And therefore, any time the people of the community or the country say, I want to know what has happened with my money, you have a duty to report. It's not a favor you're doing anybody. You have a duty to report. The SSDF has failed to report. The board has failed to discharge its duties. The executive director, the act makes provisions for the appointment of an executive director. The executive director also is at risk, because you must ask yourself, how could it be that checks were written and the executive director is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the SSDF? The board is responsible for oversight of the SSDF, ensuring the rules are in place to ensure transparency, accountability, proper systems are in place. But the executive director is responsible for the day-to-day management. That's what we know. So how could it be that such checks, and the executive director has not come out to say that these are false checks, that these checks are not from the SSDF? Not a word. There seems to be in St. Lucia today a culture where public accountability is not important and not necessary. You know in what states this thing exists? In one-party states, when you have autocracy, where the rule of law does not matter, it's the rule of the autocrat that matters. In St. Lucia today, when I see what's happening to the SSDF, it tells me, and the silence, it tells me that the laws of our laws, my law, your law, our laws, have no value. They are not respected. They are not respected at the highest level in our country. And we are going along merrily. Nothing seems to be a problem. We are in a serious place, a very serious place as a nation. And let us not forget, other nations are watching us. They are watching how we behave. They are watching how these group of people conduct themselves. Are they serious people? Are they not serious people? What is the government? Is it a serious government? Not a serious government? These are the questions that the Europeans will be asking when it comes to the taxpayers' money in the SSDF. So this is a serious matter. So for me, and when the United Workers' Party looks at this matter, we say there are some things that we should be seeing happening immediately. There ought to be an immediate, independent investigation into the SSDF, given what we see in the public domain right now. Immediate, independent investigation. We expect the board by now. The Prime Minister should have already asked that board to resign. The actors on that stage have failed to discharge their duties. Not a word. We don't expect to have the executive director in position still. You see, when we fail to act, and what is most amazing for me in my country today is that, you know, there's a saying that goes, all it takes for evil to flourish is for good men to remain silent. Words to that effect, Mr. Burks. I'm paraphrasing him. Not a word. Not a word from the NGO community. Not a word. So, if you are in the political directorate, and especially if you have a 16-1 majority, all you have to do is sit back and say, well, I can do what I want, when I want, how I want. There is no need for me to account. The NGO community is silent. They have no problem with it. You see, because when you don't speak, you're saying it is okay. It is okay. What we see happening there is okay.
Do you think that basically you said earlier that what we have probably is tantamount to an autocracy? and especially with the government receiving that 16-1 mandate. Don't you think that is what is silencing the members of the NGO community, because they're fearful
Why should you
that
be
if
fearful?
they speak up,
Why should you
that
be fearful?
certain actions can be taken against them?
Well, if that is the case, it's worse.
Victimization
If
is
that
one
is
such
the,
issue.
If that is the case, Tim, it is worse than I think. Because speaking for what is right has nothing to do with whether you have a 16-1, a 17-0, or a 9-8. Doesn't matter. There is the principle that's right. When you are a government, you are a government with the responsibility for accountability and transparency. That's your duty. Whether there was no opposition at all, you still have that responsibility. And therefore, when you act with impunity
that is
like
the
this,
ideal. That is the ideal. But can you see a government acting in that way if you have 99-8 situation where it has a mandate of 9, it has 9 seats, and the opposition has 8? Don't you think that it would feel the pressure both inside and outside of Parliament?
Well, Parliament is in our system. Parliaments, when the Parliament is convened, the members of Parliament have the opportunity to speak. Some might argue, if you say the same thing over and over and over, it might have more impact. The point is, however, if you, Timothy, says something is wrong and you're the only member of Parliament, and what you say is true, it is no less true, or it is no more true if 10 people say the same thing you've said. It is the responsibility of the government to take on board what you have said, to determine if what you have said has merit or no merit. Whether it's one voice or 1,000 voices, it is whether the matter has merit.
Then based on your argument, then it's inconsequential whether we hear from civil society.
And civil society has a duty too. The duty of civil society, because in all our democracies, what happens is that and the civil society groups become even more important where you have one voice. But it is the principle of what they are to do. Whether you have 9-8 in our situation or 16-1, the civil society still has a responsibility to expect good governance. And it is not a favor they do in the government. It is something they're doing for themselves. Bad governance affects everyone. Good governance helps everyone. So if you remain silent in the face of bad governance, do you think you getting some sort of benefit? You are going to inevitably, it might not happen in the short term, you might have a short-term gain, but it is going to eat at your core. And that's how you get failed states. When institutions the independence and the integrity has been hollowed out by politicians, in this case SSDF, what has happened there, we cannot account for it. When people remain silent, then what do you think happens? Corruption creeps in. The case of the checks is part of that corrupting of the institution. The rules that ought to have guided the institution not being upheld. The board, its duties, has it carried out those duties? You have a hollowing out of the institution and the introduction of corruption.
So therefore,
and let me be clear, Tim, corruption is not just money missing, you know. Corruption is when you introduce in a system anything that does not belong there. So if in the SSDF case, for instance, checks, vouchers, support, public assistance, if that ought to be issued under certain conditions by certain persons, staff of the institution, if records are to be kept, if all of that is what ought to happen, but we see the introduction of other entities in the process has become corrupt. You have corrupted the process.
So you think the Prime Minister, as far as this issue is concerned, on the board and the executive director of the SSDF, you think they're just merely biding their time and hoping that the citizens will forget this?
I cannot imagine what they're doing. I do know the Prime Minister knows. I also know the board and the board members know what they ought to do. They have a duty to the public to do what is right. It's not a duty to the United Workers' Party, Tim. It's a duty to everyone in St. Lucia to do what is right. Because failure to do what is right is a written verdict on them. The Prime Minister has an overall duty of care to everyone in St. Lucia. He has a duty to take care of every single citizen. He has a duty to ensure every public institution is operating at the highest standard. That is his duty. So if a public institution under his direct purview, there are so many questions circulating about that institution, the Prime Minister must know that he has a duty to ensure that the public are brought up to speed on the matter, that he is taking action to restore confidence in that institution. The Prime Minister knows that this is his duty. That is why you have a minister, as the minister under which the SSDF falls. But we have before us a situation where the St. Lucian public should be speaking. If they're not speaking because they feel intimidated for some reason, I cannot imagine why. Because it's your government, it's our government. When the citizenry become afraid to speak against their government, what does that tell you? It's our government. It's my government, it's your government. And we are afraid to tell our government something is wrong. What does it say about the government relation to us? It's no longer our government. It must be some oppressor that we are terrified of. Our government, we speak firmly and friendly to our government. We don't hide from our government. The government was not chosen by gun. We voted for the government. The government came into office by us voting for it. How do you become afraid of it? So this notion that people are afraid, if that is true, it is a reflection on the government. That something is wrong with how the government is treating its people, or how the people see that government.
How will the current situation, you think, in the long term and currently impact the reputation of the SSDF?
Unless there is, as I indicated, an immediate investigation into the SSDF. And by the way, this investigation and the persons carrying out that investigation, the choosing of that investigator, group of investigators, I would recommend must have the input of the persons who are the donors to the SSDF. It is only when whatever has happened at the SSDF is brought into public light, public scrutiny, and actions taken, can confidence return to this SSDF. Unless we bring this out before the public and the recommendations of that report are implemented, the reputation of the SSDF will be in tatters. Because right now it is on the surface akin to a slush fund. That's what it is akin to. So that cannot be what we use to service and support the vulnerable and the poor. That cannot be it. So, Tim, we have this matter, and there's been a lot of stuff circulating in the public media. But you see, this is perhaps one of the most critical things as a country we must address if we are to move forward with dignity. We cannot have institutions meant for the poor and vulnerable being used against the very poor and vulnerable. That is the worst we can get.
One of the issues as we pivot from the SSDF to yet another matter, this now famous exchange between the Prime Minister and the journalist from Al Jazeera, Josh Rushing, was covering the 51st CARICOM Heads meeting which just ended in St. Lucia. This has gone viral, and it has to do with what is being seen and described as alleged extrajudicial killings by the United States with regard to those kinetic bombings of those fishing vessels in the Caribbean waters. And one such incident apparently occurred in February between the waters of St. Lucia and St. Vincent, resulting in at least one fisherman perishing. That's Ricky Joseph. This matter is still under investigation. It's being treated as a missing person incident. But let's take you again through that exchange between the Al Jazeera journalist and the Prime Minister of St. Lucia is also the chairman of CARICOM.
Thank you. My name is Josh Rushing. I'm the senior correspondent for a show called Fault Lines on Al Jazeera English. We've been investigating the disappearances of two St. Lucians, Ricky Joseph and Nafi Williams. All evidence points toward their deaths being caused by a U.S. boat strike on February 13, 2026. Experts have told us that these extrajudicial killings amount to murder. The families who we've spent time with say they have little hope of justice. So my question for you, Prime Minister Pierre, and then I have a question broadly for everyone, but for you is, for these families, what should justice look like in this situation? And then broadly, for the other leaders present, does the United States have immunity to kill citizens in your territories for alleged crimes?
I've answered that question before. I've answered it before, and my friend Dale Elliott has asked me that question before. I'll give you the same response that I gave him. We are very concerned about the loss of life for anybody, particularly these people who lost their lives at sea. We've requested information from the United States, and we've not got any information as to what happened. As I speak, we still consider it a missing persons case, and our own law enforcement are trying their best to see if they can decipher what happened. But as far as we are concerned, the United States have given us no information on that issue.
Are you on the record to say the United States is obstructing your investigation? It's been 5 months since it happened.
I'm not on the record as saying that.
What possible information could they provide to you?
I'm on the record as saying that they've given us no information.
What possible information could you get from the United States so you could proceed with your investigation? And I return to the families who, they've told us you haven't contacted them. What should justice look like for these families?
Excuse me, let me assure you, these families are our people, you know.
Yes, sir.
They are my people, so I'm very concerned about them, I'm sure, more than you. They are my people, right? I'm very concerned about them, but all I can tell you, I can only tell you what I know. And what I know is we have not got any information from the United States. That's all I know. But I'm very concerned about them. I'm sure I'm more concerned about them than you.
Well, I would just challenge that. I've spent the week with them. I can name their children.
Yeah, but I'm sure.
Sir, can you?
Because, I mean, after this week, you're going to be leaving. I'm ahead of them. So I know that pain. I know what they're suffering from, but I can only tell you the truth.
Why haven't you reached out and talked to those families then?
I've done more than that. You see, you were still for a lot longer time.
I turned off his mic.
For the other leader.
Well, his mic was eventually cut by someone. But you saw that exchange there between, and I think most people will have seen it already, that exchange between the Prime Minister and Chairman of CARICOM and that journalist from Al Jazeera. The Prime Minister said, with regard to whether he has contacted the family, that he has done more than that. And incidentally, I think a few days later, the spouse of the late Ricky Joseph did call Newspin to comment on this, so we'll play that comment and then we'll get a reaction from you, Titus.
This is Lucia calling from Savants Bay. I saw the clip Philip J. is saying like from the time my children's father passed away, he reached out to the family, and this is not true.
So you're saying the deceased Ricky Joseph.
Yes.
Is your boyfriend, husband, child father? Okay.
Boyfriend.
Okay, so let me ask you: the Prime Minister, has he ever contacted you or your family?
He never contacted me. He never came to see me. Nothing. And then I saw the clips that he has saying he reached out to the family, and then that is not true.
But he's saying he did more than that. He's not saying that he reached out to the family. He's saying he did more than that. So what
he never did anything or whatsoever.
Response of Ricky Joseph, Lucia James in that Lucia Charles, in that call to Newspin. Your reaction, Mr. Preville?
Well, the Prime Minister stated that he had done more than that, because the journalist asked basically what does justice look like, and whether you have reached out to the families, and the caller, the spouse, well, the mother of the children of Ricky, indicated that she had not. So I think the questions that St. Lucians have now, having had the chance to hear the Prime Minister and hear the mother of Ricky's children, what exactly constitutes
let me just interrupt you there, because in the chat room there, the Newsmaker Live chat room, somebody is saying that was a whole planned thing. Why he has to call you, ma'am? Why does the Prime Minister have to call Miss Lucia Charles?
Well, Tim, I would put it this way. How often do people of St. Lucia, citizens of St. Lucia, how often do they go missing as a result of an act from another government that has annihilated, has destroyed them on the open seas? How often does that happen, Tim?
Not at all, not often.
Oh, okay, good.
But also to that individual as well. So the Prime Minister did say, I've done more than that.
Correct.
So if he's saying he's done more than that,
correct,
and he has not contacted the family, he's done nothing for the family, I think the onus is on the family to call and to say he has not done.
The family can only report. The family can only report from their perspective what they know. What they know is that he has not contacted them. He says he has done more than contacting them. In other words, I interpret the Prime Minister to be saying contacting them is something that could have been done, but he's gone beyond that. And the family is saying, but you have not contacted me. So that I am very clear, the family is saying. I'm not saying the Prime Minister has not done what he says more than that. It is up to the Prime Minister, I believe, to clarify what he means by having done more than that. Because as far as the lady is concerned, you have not contacted me. Whatever else you have done, you have not contacted me. And for me, the most basic thing would be someone to reach out to me, because it is a St. Lucian who has allegedly been blown out of the water on the high seas. Now, we live in an era and in a time where people watch television, Tim. And even if there was no television to be watched, we see on television when something happens to a citizen from a country, the country moves, the head of state moves. And this is an unprecedented situation in Utim, where it is alleged that the United States shot out of the water a St. Lucian who was defined as a fisherman. And the government, I would think, if not the Prime Minister, and normally you in situations like that, you see the president of the country, you see the head of the country going to meet that family to empathize.
That person becomes the comforter in chief.
That's what happens, because this is not a run-of-the-mill situation. So we would expect, and I am giving the Prime Minister the benefit of the doubt here, I'm saying I would expect the Prime Minister would have been doing something, but the lady does not know. And he, the Prime Minister, would have had a duty to that lady to reach out, if not directly by him, through some means. So the lady feels that the state is not treating the loss of her spouse as a normal routine function. So the questions were, if the Prime Minister has done more than, what does that look like? What are the diplomatic efforts that have been made?
Let me go to that chat room again, because imagine what the great Shazi is saying. Where did the Prime Minister lie? You'll know what the Prime Minister had to do to get the information on the incident. Secondly, she isn't married to the gentleman.
But Shazi should never say that part. I will tell Shazi, don't say that part. No, let's imagine Shazi never said that part. I don't think there is anyone in St. Lucia today who would be proud of what Shazi has said, that she is not married to the person. So therefore, she should not ask a question as the mother of his children. Let me not talk about that. This is disgraceful. But here is what the ladies are only saying: I don't understand what you're saying because I have not seen you or anyone come to me. The Prime Minister says something. It is up to the Prime Minister today, even now, to indicate to the people of St. Lucia, here is what my government has done in response to this unprecedented situation. Because if it happens once, it could happen again. And the people of St. Lucia would like to know how their government stands with them in situations like that. That is not asking for too much. So you're asking to see the government has expressed compassion. If the government can tell you what are the next steps are, what steps it has taken, and so the people of St. Lucia feels the government is in their corner. Now, this matter clearly is a matter where you have a superpower and you have a Mino. But it does not mean the Mino doesn't have rights. The Mino can do what the Mino can do. So, do we know whether the Prime Minister has been working with his CARICOM colleagues and, mounting a special mission to Washington? We do not know. So, the Prime Minister could have, either him, his foreign minister, the parliamentary rep, somebody should have reached out to the lady in the name of the government, expressing concern, and that government of St. Lucia should have by now said to the people of St. Lucia, a St. Lucian has died in very strange circumstances. We have taken the following steps. We are constrained by certain things, but here is what we could have done, and we have done it. That is not being unreasonable. That is being what we expect the government to do.
We'll put a telephone number on screen that you can call with your comments and your questions, but I suspect we should take a break. We will take a break, Mr. Producer, and the broadcast will continue in just a moment with your calls with regard to your comments and questions for my guest. He is Mr. Titus Preville of the Opposition United Workers' Party. Stay with us. You're watching NewsMaker Live right here on DBS Television. We are also on Facebook. My guest is Mr. Titus Preville of the opposition UWP. We'll put the telephone number on screen right now so that you can call with your questions and your comments for my guest. We have our first call online. Good evening to you, NewsMaker Live. You're on the air.
Good night, Tim. Good night, Mr.
Preville. Good evening to you, sir.
Let's go down memory lane a bit. To me, both Just situation and the gentleman situation is kind of similar. Would you say that?
No, absolutely not.
When I say, I mean untimely deaths.
Oh, untimely deaths. We have that. Yes, we have untimely deaths. Yes.
And what did the former Prime Minister do? Didn't he reach out?
Didn't the former Prime Minister reach out
to the major family?
Yes, he did. He did. Well, he did.
So I don't see. I think that was the right thing to do. The country was moved. I don't know. That is how I see it. I think something better should have been done with this family in terms of the authorities for this untimely death. That's all I can say. Have a good night.
I'll call you too.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for calling.
Although we cannot compare them.
Yeah. We have another call? No, we have lost this call. But continue to call us. Once again, questions, comments for my guest, Mr. Titus Preville of the opposition UWP. Hello, good evening. You're on the air. Hello? Good evening. You're on the air.
Good night, Mr. Preville.
Good evening to you, caller.
What about the $7 million on vaccine money?
What are you talking about, caller?
And we never get vaccine during COVID. What is the outcome of that money?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, caller. I think it is time we deal with this matter. We have tried to deal with this matter, but it's like when you've drunk Kool-Aid and you don't like the taste, it stays in your mouth. So people want to. During COVID, Tim, the St. Lucia, the Caribbean, the developing world, they were starved of vaccines. The available vaccines were being hoarded by the more developed countries. So what were the options developing a small island like St. Lucia had? St. Lucia, the Prime Minister of St. Lucia at the time, had two options. He could sit on his hands and do nothing, or he could join up with other heads of government of CARICOM to try to get vaccines for their people. So Alan Chasney teamed up with Mia Motley, with the Prime Minister of Bahamas, and they pursued a conduit to try to access vaccines for their people. That's what they did. They took action to get vaccines for the people. As it turned out, the supplier of the vaccines, and this was not done in a clandestine manner. There are records in the treasury of the monies that was sent to do all of that. So there's transparency. It turns out that the supplier of the vaccines did not meet his end or their end and deliver the vaccine as was supposed to. So it is not just St. Lucia who didn't get the vaccines at the time. Bahamas didn't get, Barbados didn't get, St. Lucia didn't get. So it is a situation where the Prime Minister of St. Lucia sought to try to do something for his people by trying to procure vaccine in an environment where vaccines were being hoarded. As we speak, legal action has been taken to retrieve those monies, to retrieve as much of those monies as possible from the persons who were supposed to have delivered the vaccines. And the government of St. Lucia has received some monies out of the 7 million, has received some monies for that. So this matter is going through a legal process. So when you ask what has happened, what has happened is that vaccines were being, an attempt was being made, not by one man, but by at least 3 leaders to try to do something for their people who had no vaccines during COVID.
We have a call. Good evening to you. NewsMaker Live, you're on the air.
Good evening to you, Tim, and good evening to your guest.
Good evening to you, Shazi.
Tim, I listened to the explanation from your guest a while ago about our vaccine money.
Okay, hold on. I don't want to spend the entire evening on that particular issue. No. I want you to listen to me very, very well.
Okay.
I have Mr. Preville. We have discussed two issues. We have discussed the SSDF, and we also look at the issue involving the fisherman who's lost at sea. He cannot be accounted for. So let's not go on on this whole vaccination. We have discussed it already. We have had Mr. The former Prime Minister Shasti on. He has addressed the issue as well. There's no need to belabor the point, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, right. I'm saying to him, well, firstly, I'm saying to him that SSDF has never had better checks and balances put in place by the new chairman and the new board. And he needs to check it out to see. Right before SSDF was the cash cow of the United Workers' Party government. They did what they want with the finances of the SSDF. So please do your homework.
Shazi, what checks and balances? What checks and balances have been put in place?
Well, I cannot give you all the details.
No. Shazi made a point that checks and balances have been put in.
I got that information from the chairperson. Speak to the chairperson, and he should speak to them before he said he makes it.
But Shazi, if you have not verified it and you cannot defend it, you should not be saying it on NewsMaker Live.
Okay, let me go further. Let me go one step further. I don't know if you know that Martinique has an oil refinery. You know what the cost of a liter of gas is in Martinique? €1.90. That's almost $6. In St. Lucia, it's $3 and change, almost $4 for a liter of gas.
Shazi, what are you talking about?
And we are complaining.
Shazi, Okay. What are you talking about? We're talking about SSDF. You're talking about
let me go back to that. Let me continue my statement, please. I'm saying that St. Lucians are now experiencing the best roads they have ever had.
All right, thank you. You're calling the wrong show. Obviously, you're calling the wrong show. My apologies to you, Shazi, but we can't continue along those lines. No, can't entertain that. Good evening, NewsMaker Live, you're on the air.
Tim,
good evening
how are
to
you
you.
doing?
I'm okay, sir.
Good evening, and to your guest, Mr. Preville.
Hi, good evening.
Now, I want to be, because I know you have other areas and people to call. But Tim, I am extremely saddened by this ridiculous and senseless discussion concerning the lady, the mother of the children, from the fisherman's children. And I'm reading comments about who is next of kin. The lady is not married to the man. Tim, is that really what we are discussing in St. Lucia? An individual next of kin can be your father, your mother, or your wife. And to say that the lady should be excluded because she's not married to the man, I mean, there are 3 or 4 children who unfortunately now have no father. All they have is a mother. So this mother should be paramount in anything that is going on. He's the one taking care of the children. So I am so disgusted by seeing and hearing and reading comments about married, not married, and next of kin. I mean, the lady is paramount. The lady should be foremost in anything discussion that is happening with regards to the fisherman. Thank you, Tim.
All right, sir. Thank you so much.
Tim, I would say, I am sure, I am most certain by tomorrow we will hear the women in the government of St. Lucia make clear statements about this situation where people are now somehow selectively choosing when women have rights and they don't. Because anyone, whether on social media or belonging anywhere, who would pursue that path of trying to now in 2026 tell people that married women have rights and unmarried women have none, and therefore they should not make any inquiries about the father of their children. Anybody in that discussion is a person who is totally unconnected with the real world. Because St. Lucia, among other CARICOM countries, have made so many strides in removing the discrimination between illegitimate children and legitimate children. So much progress has been made. And to know in 2026, someone, anyone out there will bring that up as a line of argument or discussion is distasteful. And that's why I refuse to speak to Shazia on that matter. Because he should never have gone down that road tonight. Because I expect him to hold a higher standard. And anyone doing that in St. Lucia is spitting in the face of the women of this country. That's what they're doing. And the children who have been born out of wedlock. And guess what? This constitutes one of the most significant components of our population. A number of our people today were born out of wedlock. And so this is a matter I take very, very, very close to my heart. We cannot allow ourselves to descend into that type of human being when a person is speaking about the father of their children who has been shot out of the water by a superpower. And that is where we're headed. We should be asking our government, what have you done? What will you do in the future? If such a situation were to repeat itself, the people of St. Lucia need to understand what our government would be doing. That's where our discussion should be. Not in this backward place and this dark place that I hear someone is taking time, some people are taking time to go. This is distasteful.
Good evening, NewsMaker Live, you're on the air.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Poleon. Good evening to Mr.
Preville. Good evening to you, sir.
All right, yeah. So I want to get one thing straight, right? Mr. Preville, you said something about Bahamas, Barbados, and St. Lucia with, let me paraphrase it as procuring for the vaccine. Yes, they may have tried to source the vaccine, but Barbados never paid a cent. Neither did the Bahamas. The point was to find out what happened to money. That's the point of money. So the situation of the money issue. All right, Barbados never paid. Back now to the fisherman problem. You actually, the way I heard you speaking is like we are sure that the fishermen got blown up at sea. And when investigations like this occurs in any part of the world, there must be sign of a body or something to accurately say that, look, that boat was bombed and that person is missing off that boat, and there's evidence that is, to show, well, that's the picture, this person is on the boat. Police do not have any such. Getting any information from the Americans is not that easy. You could ask the RSS, it is not that easy. Next, Trinidad himself, we know of many reports of Trinidadians being blown up off in between Venezuela to Trinidad water. The Prime Minister of Trinidad actually said at a conference that with the absence of evidence, they cannot pursue more. So I need you to try and be more factually or more truthful to the public and stop playing around with games when it comes to investigation on matters like this. Because you all are playing games with this thing and playing politics with it. This is a problem that's been happening for years, where the U.S. Coast Guard would do things in the region, and we cannot have evidence to it because we can't get proper information from them. And I'm sure you may have been aware of it, being a PS in the past. We know that actions taken by the U.S., as you said, the Goliath and the little lamb at the bottom. We cannot get that information. Next thing I'm saying, as Tim said, the Prime Minister may have done more, visiting the parent of the children. What does it do to bring back the gentleman or to console the lady? Mr. Poleon said, that probably he would have used his agents or somebody to go through, and he would have done more. So he never said he himself gone. And I don't think going. So if prime ministers in the Caribbean have to go to everybody's parents that were shot, or spouses that were shot, Is that going to do anything? To me, it's more politically when they go to the fields, when they are politically aligned to the people. So I don't see that doing anything for them.
Okay,
so let's be more truthful when it comes to these type of things, please. Especially when it comes to investigation.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Colin.
I think the public can judge for themselves the content of that discussion because of that contribution. Because I will say it again, how often have St. Lucians been allegedly or otherwise bombed out of the water? You know, Tim, if it is that St. Lucian went missing and it was not a shooting or a bombing, let the Prime Minister tell us what the situation is. If the situation is that he has been told by the Americans that they did not do such a thing, let us know, because it is a very straightforward matter. If the Americans did such a thing, they did it. If they did not do it, they did not do it. So let us, because where we are at now is a lady is missing the father of her children. It is alleged that this person was killed in a manner by another power. If the Prime Minister does not have the information to confirm it is the other power, he could come out and meet the lady and say so. Because where she is at now, it is not a case where he went missing by drowning. It is not a case where the information she has is that the wind or a storm threw him off course and cannot be found. And even in these circumstances, your Prime Minister should still be going, and because these are not regular situations.
The other issue is
I cannot understand the angle from which the gentleman is.
And he also made another point where this is something that's been happening for a while now.
I don't know it has.
In Caribbean waters. No, he's saying that this happened very often, and the Americans have not provided any kind of explanation or clarification. All the reason why CARICOM leaders ought to have some kind of discussion with the Americans on issues of that nature. Another point is there was a wreckage that was found, and it is in the possession of the police, and the people are claiming that the wreckage is that of the boat that this gentleman was
But more than that, Tim, there is a framework of cooperation between CARICOM and the United States. There's a framework. So the Prime Minister, I'm sure, would have used that framework. Let the people know what the framework has revealed. Let the people understand what it is your government, our government, is doing in their interest. That is what the lady is saying, you know. And if the Prime Minister says he has done more, what is that more?
It needs explanation. We have a call. This is NewsMaker Live, you're on the air. I mean, this is the
good evening, gentlemen. Very edifying discussion and discourse. I wanted to pose a question to Dr. Preville.
Not Dr. Preville. Mr. Preville.
Mr. Preville. The people of St. Lucia seem to have made their voices pretty clear in terms of electing this government, and it seems that unless a clearly articulated vision for St. Lucia is put forward by the opposition, that this government will remain in power for the next 15, 20 years. And so I'd really love to get Mr. Preville's thoughts on what is the United Workers' Party's clear vision for the next 15, 20 years for this country, because I think that's what St. Lucians are waiting on to make a decision as to what happens at the next poll. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
I don't understand the question in that. If the caller is saying that the United Workers' Party did not put out a vision for St. Lucia, I don't know what our manifesto content was. The manifesto's content outlined our plans for the various sectors for St. Lucia. It spoke to a comprehensive approach to the development of the economy. It spoke to a comprehensive approach on the development of the social sectors, education, healthcare, national security in terms of crime. All of that was well articulated. Now, if the caller says that the current government articulated a plan, and the plan that they articulated is the reason why the people voted for them, well, let us see what we know today. And maybe the plan they have today, we we will not be able to see the results for a while, but it is the same administration in office from 2021. And what are the results we're seeing today from this administration? We see and we can see that transparency and accountability has gone out the door. We can see today that we have agreements under the CIP. We have arrangements that nobody knows what is happening with respect to any audit of the economic fund. We don't know what is going on there. I don't know if that is part of the vision for St. Lucia. I don't see that being a vision. We have agreements with Global Ports, GPH, where there is an agreement which will last for the next 30 to 40 years. And no one can see and tell what is the content of this agreement. This agreement is similar agreements are online, made available in the case of Antigua, the Bahamas, and even St. Vincent with an MOU recently. But we don't know what is in ours. So I don't understand what we mean by there is a vision, because all I see is opaqueness. We have a situation right now where a minister of government, as we speak, is under investigation for serious investigation by the police into a very serious criminal matter, a matter criminal in nature. And the minister is still apparently in office. He's still holding his office. And the prime minister has said nothing. So I don't believe that could be a vision for St. Lucia. And I cannot believe that the people of St. Lucia were voting for that. You know, these are the things that are in your face right now today, Tim. So, and I want to spend a little time on this matter with respect to the situation confronting St. Lucia now. There's a credibility problem in our cabinet, a credibility problem for our prime minister in how he handles that particular situation. The prime minister of St. Lucia is on record, where a situation this similar to what we have before us, this similar but involving a government minister in the United Workers' Party, and he was vociferous in his request for that person to be removed from office. There was no investigation. The person was never alleged of committing a crime. In fact, the person was the victim of blackmail. But the Prime Minister of St. Lucia today, the Honorable Philip J. Pierre, he was strident that where any allegation that could ruin the good name of St. Lucia in a situation involving a minister of government holding a high office in the land, that what should happen is that that person should be removed from office. And we have a situation here before us today, and there is silence. Silence. So these are the things that are before us now. The government is in office. It is there right now. And I would have expected our callers to take the opportunity, given that we have a 16-1 situation in our country, that the citizenry who would be calling this program would be helping in keeping the government to account for themselves. Because when the government is held to account, when the government performs as it is expected to, everybody benefits. Everyone. So where we have situations such as the SSDF, where we have situations such as we see with a minister of government in the situation where he is right now, and the prime minister apparently not acting, these are the questions I expect every St. Lucian, regardless of political party affiliation, should be speaking on, so that the government gets on and take the corrective actions, do what is necessary for the people of St. Lucia.
You have a final call. Good evening to you. NewsMaker Live, you're on the air.
Yes, I have a question for your guest.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. First of all, Mr. Preville, I respect your right to ask the question about what our government is doing in respect of what has happened to our fishermen at sea. I think it's a timely question to ask. Even then, everyone you consider that, of course, with the strength of the U.S. vis-a-vis that minuscule little entity that we are, but the question needs to be asked, and I respect that. And I would also want to ask you, sir, I think sometimes our parties only look and question things when it comes from the opposite party and not from within. I would also like to think that you are asking questions from within. Well, for instance, can you tell me what you think about your party leader suggesting that the gangs have a pivotal role in bringing up our young people, considering the role that gangs are playing in the society.
Oh, you see, my political leader said that the gangs have a role in
raising our children. Yes, he did say that quite clearly, and I'd like to hear what you have to say on that.
Very well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that.
That's our final call, by the way.
Yes, Tim, and I can say that when the leader of the opposition today, Honorable Alan Shastney, was speaking on the matter, his intention was very clear to me. He might have said words that people interpret one way, but his intention was clear. He was saying, look, the approach that has been used is to fight the gangs. And where are the results we're getting from that approach? And he was saying, in the absence of us having structures, organized structures in our society to deal with young men who are left basically with nothing to do, the gangs will come in and the gangs will play the role of what we should have had organized institutions playing. So there is a gap. And he was saying that the gangs are doing something. What they're doing is the wrong thing. In other words, there is a void and the gangs are filling that void. What we should do is take those gangs, bring them in. In other words, guys, you all are doing something to these young people, but the direction you all are bringing them in is the wrong one. We need you now to get reformed. Turn around. Turn your life around. Gangs. The gangs are made up of people, Tim. Human beings like you and me. And these human beings, they too, if given the right circumstances, have the opportunity to reform. That's why you have reform. That's why you have, for instance, Borderly being treated as a reform institution. So even the gangs in our society, there is, if they are willing to work with the police, with the government, there is still room to bring them into mainstream society. So what Alan was seeking to do was say, look, you all have been playing a role. The role you've been playing is the wrong role. You need to be reformed. You need to play a completely different role. Come within organized society. Walk away from that path. And if you truly want to help young people, then when you have done that, continue playing the role of helping young people. That is what he was saying. There are many instances and cases where there are persons, young men, who have been gang leaders. And you see the stories all the time. They have been gang leaders. And circumstances, situations, and in fact, I saw a program with Dale Elliott, I think it was, recently, where a young man who was in the gang, today, he is playing the role of a mentor, of getting young people away from the gang. And that was what Alan was seeking to communicate, that there is always the possibility of someone who has gone down the wrong path, doing the wrong thing, that this person can be reformed to do the right thing. And we see cases, we have cases where young people have done that over and over. And I refer to the young man in St. Lucia right here, who today has reformed his life and is helping others.
Final comments from you, sir.
My final comments are simply this. Our country today is at a point where we need to see the Prime Minister of St. Lucia act with seriousness, decisiveness, and clarity on a number of issues pertaining that impact the government of St. Lucia and governance in St. Lucia. The Prime Minister must act with alacrity on the matter of the SSDF. The Prime Minister must take immediate action, in fact, his own advice, on the matter of the Cabinet Minister who is currently under investigation by the police. And the Prime Minister must relieve this Cabinet Minister of his ministerial portfolio. The Prime Minister has called for similar action in the past involving a government minister, where there was a situation where the government minister had not done anything anywhere near what is before him now in his cabinet. But his call was for, in the national interest, for the public good, that this minister should be removed from office. And that was what was done by the then Prime Minister, Alan Shastney. So the Prime Minister knows what the nation expects him to do. The Prime Minister is the current chair of CARICOM. And as the chair of CARICOM, I am sure the other Prime Ministers of CARICOM would expect him to lead that institution in this time with a reputation that shows he is decisive, that he does not tolerate any situation such as what we have in our cabinet, in the cabinet right now with respect to a minister. The Prime Minister should consider and ask himself, what would Sir John do faced with a similar situation? And one might say Sir John is dead. But he should perhaps ask himself, what would his colleague, Mayor Motley, do if faced with a situation like that? Tim, your guess is as good as mine.
Thank you so much for being my guest on this evening's NewsMaker Live, Mr. Titus Preville of the opposition UWP. And to you, thank you so much for watching and listening to the broadcast and calling as well. If it's Wednesday, it's NewsMaker Live. Time now for the clip that peaked.
No one no good. To say that was my liver. I've been drinking, smoking cigars. Used to sing and play my guitar. Now I was doing something new. Heaven is in the world. Telling you it's what comes on. Maybe what I do. See that was my liver. Just got to open.
That's the broadcast. My name is Timothy Poleon saying good night and see you next time.
I, Philip Joseph here, I would like to be judged as being the Prime Minister, not being judged as being part of a government.
Came into government that we had a manifesto and a vision and mission that had been approved by my party, by the highest body.
Basel 11 has not been in existence. 50 was...
Giant getting bazooka. You spraying big on to knock out mosquitoes.
I have never had a joint account with anybody in my life. Not my ex-wife, not my children, nobody. And I will refer that to the Privileges Committee.
What about the culture of people getting into office and not being effective?
What
people become Prime Minister of Lucia have been the most ready.
Let's do it this Wednesday, because if it's Wednesday, it's NewsMaker Live.